Ну що ж, ми будемо починати тоді, так? Всі вже тут? Я представлюсь, мене звуть Катерина Сергацькова, я журналіст, і я буду модерувати цю зустріч, яка має таку велику і складну тему – діалог та примирення. І от одразу скажу, що українські учасники можуть говорити українською або російською, буде переклад з англійською синхронний, тому всі можуть взяти ці штуки. І я думаю, що
The participants can speak English, Russian, Ukrainian. We have simultaneous translation. So we will discuss dialogue and reconciliation. We have obtained requests from our Austrian colleagues. We were asked to describe the initiatives, Ukrainian initiatives related to the protection of human rights, the cultural initiatives, the issues with the cultural issues in Ukraine, educational issues, and we have invited experts from the educational sector. So the topic which we have chosen for today, reconciliation and the dialogue. Of course, it's a rather broad topic, and let us start. I invite our Austrian colleagues to represent themselves and express what they expect from this meeting.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation, which is very interesting for all of us. I'm Hannes Swoboda. I'm for many years, for 18 years, I was a member of European Parliament and leader of the Social Democratic Group. I was very often here in Ukraine, very disappointed by the developments before the Maidan and very happy about the changes, but sometimes unhappy about the lack of progress. In my former life, I was also city councillor for urban development and planning in Vienna, where I got to know also Jörg Schollhammer very much. And now I'm president of different institutes. One is the Center for Architecture in Vienna. The other is the International Institute for Peace. And the third one is the Vienna Institute for International Economics. So my interest is quite broad, from urban development, reconciliation, and of course economic development. Three subjects, I think, which are very important to bring Ukraine forward. I think Ukraine has a European destiny. It's not an easy thing to join European Union, but I think we in Europe must fully support the development in Ukraine with all our possibilities. And all of us who are here have an interest not just to look at Ukraine, but to have a dialogue and a partnership with Ukraine. We are not the teachers, but we could be hopefully good partners for Ukraine in their development. The next Austrian, I think, is...
Good evening. So. Na bitte.
Okay. Hi. I'm at the corner. Hi, I'm Tanja Windbüchler. I'm from the Green Party. I'm the member of the National Parliament in Vienna, and I'm the spokesperson for foreign policy and development cooperation for our party. And it's I'm very appreciate that this meeting is able to. Thank you for the organization. Thanks for your time to have this contact, to have the form or a sort of a kind of, how should I say, to talk about how can ceasefire fixed, how can we help to have a good dialogue between all participations. How can we have a good relationship, and how is it able to do free Ukraine for everybody, and that's what's important for me.
Now, hello everybody. My name is Jakob Fürst. I'm an assistant at the Herbert C. Kellman Institute for Interactive Conflict Transformation. Herbert C. Kellman is a social psychologist who did a lot of research on conflicts and organized problem-solving workshops in escalated conflicts, and we are continuing this tradition with our institute in Vienna. For me, this is mainly a field trip to understand and learn more about the situation in Ukraine and to define whether we, as the Kellman Institute, can contribute something.
Hello everybody, my name is Claudia Stadler. I'm working for the Green Party in the Austrian Parliament on foreign policy and development cooperation, and we are very much interested how the Austrian Parliament could support civil society in general in all their endeavors in the peace process, reintegration of IDPs, humanitarian aid. Thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Gerhard Machel. I work with the Karl Renner Institute, that's the political academy of the Austrian Social Democrats in Austria. I regard our trip to Ukraine as a sort of fact-finding mission to learn more about the conflict, and I would appreciate it to learn more about possibilities how we in Austria could support dialogue or even reconciliation activities and projects here.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for having us. My name is Stefanie Fenkert, and me too, I work with Hannes Swoboda at International Institute for Peace, and like him, we are interested in dialogue, if it's possible, as a precondition maybe for reconciliation. How can we facilitate it maybe, if Austria could be a platform, because it's so many emotions in this conflict, if maybe a neutral country could provide a platform to bring people together to discuss their own situation, because Ukrainian people know best what their issues are and how to overcome them. Thank you very much.
My name is Georg Blaha. I'm a teacher. My relation to this subject here is that I got contact to a teacher college in a city near Donetsk in March 2014, and from that time the contact continued till now. We made a dialogue project in 2015 with our students. They had some Skype conferences, they made films about each school and exchanged it and so on. And now the idea is to make a larger project, dialogue project with more than this one school. Yes, that's the point now.
My name is Peter Steirer. I'm coming from the Green fraction in the Austrian Parliament either. I'm the first time in Kiev. I'm very impressed about the status of the civil society here and what we have heard until now, and which meetings we had until now, yesterday and today. The dialogue platform and at the Institute for Peace and Common Grounds was our first. And in the evening we were at this visual center, and today we had at Hromadske TV and Anti-Corruption Initiative and so on. And it's really impressive to look at that, what a quality the civil society in Kiev has. So I am here as somebody who has to learn, but my main interest is also if there are sensible possibilities, not to support dialogue projects between initiatives or people or persons in Ukraine and especially in the separatist regions in Lugansk and Donetsk, where I see the main blockades for little progress in the direction of peace are in the moment.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you, everybody. Now, let us discuss Ukrainian initiatives. We will begin with Yegor Stadny. Good evening. I am Yegor Stadny. I represent the SEDES Analytical Center. My area of expertise is educational policy, although we deal with the internal migration, we deal with IDPs. Also, we study the educational policy, budget policy, and the public space. I am Zahar Popovich. I represent the Center of Social and Labor Studies. We have the set of projects devoted to pre-tests. Then we study social and economic situation in Ukraine. We try to develop alternative economic strategies, alternative to what the government suggests. And also I can discuss in more detail the social movements in Ukraine. Is it enough? Yeah, I think as of now that's enough. Let's first describe generally what you deal with, and then in more detail. I'm Maxim Butkevich. I'm coordinator of the project Without Borders. We deal with assistance to those who look for asylum in Ukraine from other countries. We deal with xenophobia problem, with hatred and anti-discrimination issues. And from March last year, we deal with the problem of IDPs in Ukraine. Besides that, we work in the area of media education. I'm a journalist and co-founder of the Media and Human Rights Protection Organization, the Human Rights Protection Center. Also, I am a member of the Solidarity Committee organization, which supports Ukrainian hostages in Crimea. These were Ukrainian citizens who were taken as hostages by to Moscow. Oleg Sentsov and his colleagues. I'm Olena Sholova, and I coordinate the German community of international outreach. We are the major platform in Ukraine, which organizes meetings, and we are a contact point for delivering information about situation in Ukraine on German-speaking countries. Besides that, we have several projects in our pipeline, cultural projects. We organize meetings for the experts who discuss reforming process in Ukraine. Also, we maintain dialogue with the government and with the experts on the most topical issues in society and try to suggest some solutions to the problem issues. Good evening. I'm Olesa Ostrovska-Luta. Since recent time, I'm director of the Artistic and Cultural Center, the Arts Arsenal, Before that, I worked for the analytical center, which analyzes the various projects against the background of the social importance of those projects. In the past, I also worked as a deputy minister of culture. So I deal with the culture phenomenon, and I'm related to the development of cultural policy. I'm Sasha Romantsova. I represent the Center for Civil Liberties. This is a human rights activist organization. We very closely cooperate with the Euromandan SOS organization. I have an experience with monitoring of human rights violations in the East and Crimea. I participated in several monitoring missions on site. Also, I represent such a campaign as Let My People Go. We are involved in the campaigning for liberation of Ukrainian citizens who were taken like hostages by the Russian Federation. And also we are coordinators of the Human Rights Platform, which analyzes all newly developed Ukrainian bills. We check them against the human rights standards. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm happy to see you here, all those who I have known already and new people. I'm pleased to meet people with who I wanted to meet for a long time. I'm Andrei Repa. I'm philosopher, interpreter. I work in Nika Center Publishing House. And I write some articles from time to time. I lecture. I am moderating a literature club, a discussion cinema club. I was lecturing on culture and Marxism, for example, and then in the school of loneliness, I also lectured for Kiev audience and Vienna audience. So it's very logical for me to continue what we started discussing in Vienna and in Kiev.
Доброго дня.
Good afternoon, Julia Vaganova. I joined the team of Mistetsky Arsenal that Alessa has mentioned. I'm now a deputy director. Before that, I worked in the National Arts Museum. I was the deputy director, and before that in the Center of Contemporary Art, talking about expert knowledge. The National Art Museum and the Center of Contemporary Arts, that's where we were trying to organize some projects which helped to make a museum a platform for dialogue between traditional and contemporary. Good afternoon, Evgenia Moller. I am from Izolyatsiya International Fund. I am responsible for Mosaics project, and that's about preservation of the Soviet heritage of Ukraine. We are also examining the processes of decommunization of Ukraine and the representation in public space. And that's what I've been working on for the last 2 years.
Добрий день, мене звати Андрій Дігтяренко.
I am Andriy Dekhtarenko. I am the chief director of Realna Gazeta. That's a publication from Lugansk. I am the IDP. I am also the editor of the project Donbas Realities on TV. We are specializing on the problems of those people who are on both sides of the contact line. We follow the cultural processes which are taking place in Lugansk and Donetsk regions, in the territories which are not under the control of the government. We write about the IDPs, we analyze the conflict, and we are trying to improve the situation this way. Good evening, Olga Gonchar. I work in the UCMC, and that's where you are. And I'm responsible for the cultural issues. For 2 years, we've been implementing the project Cultural Diplomacy between the regions of Ukraine. We work in the pre-front and liberated cities. We believe that it's not enough just to win the war. We need to go there and to try to understand what the war is about. And for that, we need to go to these regions. What I could share is the experience of implementing projects there, because every project is cooperation with local authorities, local mass media, local activists, and we are also researching the issues of decommunization, the issues of identity, of history. We work with local activists, with museums, artists, and we are the leader, the medium between the East and the whole of Ukraine, because most of the projects that are taking place with our information and communication support. We are in the fields all the time, either in the East or in the regions. We have a very big database of contacts. So if you are interested, we are ready to share that. Talking about Kiev, here we organize different discussions, this work is part of our press center. So I've heard from our Austrian colleagues that many of them are talking about ceasefire in the east of Ukraine, on how can this military conflict be stopped. But I believe it would be good for each one of us from Ukrainian side to say whether reconciliation and dialogue are important for Ukrainian society. What problems do you see in your activities? Maybe we will start just like we started. Yegor, from you. If not from you, then someone else. Oля. I can start from the point of view of culture. When we came to the East, we realized that it's not just the problem of infrastructure. To implement the cultural project, you need premises, water, light. Most of the infrastructure was destroyed. To have water in the library is a problem, but the biggest problem is that now the major players don't communicate between themselves until someone from outside arrives. The activists will not come to the event initiated by the authorities, and the authorities will not go to the event initiated by activists. So we were trying to create the platform where all these people who live in one town and who should fight for one thing, we were trying to organize projects so that they meet together and start working. And we, I believe, succeeded somewhat in that. And now the authorities, the mass media, and the community, they help each other, but they cooperate. But it is important for someone to come from outside, like people from Kiev. Then they are happier to cooperate between themselves. Maxim Butkevich. Talking about how much we need to have the ceasefire. From my own experience, from talking to IDPs and to colleagues who work there near the front line, and from my own experience of staying in May of 2014 in Donetsk and then near the front line, I can make several comments. On the one hand, I have seen few people who do not believe that ceasefire is needed. I don't see people who would say that the war should continue at any price, and that's understandable. Then the question is very practical. First of all, Kiev, and I am part of that. I mean the citizens, not the authorities, but they are asking who should you come to agreement with about peace, to come to agreement with, to discuss it with the leaders of self-proclaimed republics. There's no sense in that, there's little perspective in that, because they are not independent in their actions. All understand perfectly well what is the political force which is on the other side of the front line, who can decide on stopping the military actions. But for that, but we mean, of course, the political authorities of Russian Federation. In the nearest perspective, I don't see that there might be only the conflict frozen, but I don't see any perspective that there will be a long-term peace. But we need to think about what we should do when the war is over. Then we need to communicate to different communities who live on the territory of eastern Ukraine, in the mainland of Ukraine and Crimea, how to organize joint initiatives. I'm concerned, and my colleagues are concerned, that just like in most of the conflicts, the longer is the armed conflict, the more black and white, and you perceive this picture as black and white. In 2014, people remembered that not all who live on the occupied territories are the supporters of self-proclaimed republics, like those who left the occupied territories are Ukrainian patriots, but now there are more and more myths that divide the people of Ukraine into two camps that are fighting each other. And I believe that's quite harmful, talking about xenophobic motives. Now we have this line of divide between ethnical nationalistic camp and the camp which is supporting the rights and freedoms of people. The ideological fighting is between these camps, and the longer is the war, the more will be people who are losing their friends, relatives, and there's more desire to support simpler, more radical, more nationalistic, more authoritarian force. That's very logical. development. We've been expecting it. We believe that it will be happening much faster and more radical. It's happening slowly, but that process is very dangerous, and that is why we need peace. That's for the sake of those who are on the occupied territories and for the sake of the free Ukrainian community. That is our conviction, and professionally it's more difficult for us to explain it to the society.
От ці питання.
And these are the problems that you've mentioned, that they concern the fact how mass media present all these issues. Alessia was the first one, and then Sasha. Okay, I just wanted to continue what Maxim said. Me, maybe not just me, but we very often think that one of the key problems that does not allow us to easily switch to dialogue between different groups, there are two things there. One, when we are talking about reconciliation, we need to understand what type of reconciliation and with who, because there are gaps in different places and the vectors of reconciliation are different, starting from the vector of reconciliation between Ukrainians, who Maxim calls Kiev position, and Ukrainians on the occupied territories, including Crimea, and the vector of reconciliation between Ukrainians and Russians. In the future, we need to think about that. The real problems will start when children grow up, those children who are 10 years old, and they now have different understanding of who Russians are than the generation who are 35, 40 now. That's interesting how then this will be developing. Another vector is citizens and institutes. Between Ukrainian citizens and Ukrainian institutions, there is a war going on. That's a metaphor, of course. I mean that there is a big mistrust. I can give you my own example as the former deputy minister who came to the ministry as the candidate from the citizens, and next day became the evil from the point of view of the citizens because I was part of the institution then. These are very obvious things, and we need to understand why such gaps are, but we need to organize the dialogue only when we have the security for those who are speaking. And the security is a key thing that Ukrainians lack, not just from the beginning of the war, but for long period of time. Because one thing is the security which is violated by military actions, another one is the security which is violated by courts, by police, by law enforcement bodies. Education doesn't ensure the feeling of security and stability. That complicates any dialogue, and the possible mediator who can be between these groups, well, we do not understand who this person is, who the mediator should be trusted, but who can become such a mediator? Ukrainian society is much stronger than we could have imagined 2 years ago, and maybe much more mature in the situation we have with all the challenges we have. On the one hand, there are big challenges, difficulties, problems. Another thing is that there is a hope, the resilience.
Sasha Romantsova. I have 4 statements. And actually, this continues what my colleagues started to describe. From the human rights point of view, that we face the following issues when we visit the pre-contact line areas. The perception of the conflict is very different among people depending on the mass media which they watch or listen. My recent visit was to Slavyansk. Slavyansk is a small city not far from the contact line, and there is opposition between pro-Ukrainian forces, illegal supporters of illegal band formation, and pro-Russian separatist forces. But there is also part of people who wish to change something. They are very eagerly involved into all the projects. And there is part of people who felt rather comfortable in the past under previous regimes, and they try to bring that old regime back. They complain that they do not have the party of the regions anymore, which created some stability for them. And they felt that in the past they felt rather comfortable. They had a lot of relations, stable relations in that past situation, and they would like to revive it. At the same time, many people who live there, they have the very old-fashioned perception based on the Soviet ideology of the war. You are either a hero or a victim, or you are a traitor and collaborationist. And there could be only 3 roles in their vision. And this creates a lot of problems. For example, children, when we try to evacuate children from the contact line, they felt totally confused how to perceive the roles which they are suggested to perform. Also, there is a big conflict between those who moved from there, who escaped from that territories, and those who left. The IDPs who escaped from the conflict. Sometimes we hear that authorities say that those IDPs should go back to the liberated territories and live there. At the same time, the IDPs who arrived to other regions of Ukraine, they do not wish to integrate to the new regions. And 6 million of people who relocated, and they feel rather comfortable. For example, there were some people who relocated from Donbass to Odessa region, for example, and discovered that in a village it's possible to have all services like hairdressers, like a good shop, and they do not wish to go back to Donetsk Oblast, where there are no such services and infrastructure in small villages. Whether they wish to create something new in the new places of residence. with some IDPs, I saw that they felt happy when they felt that they were free to choose where to live and what to do with their lives, because many of IDPs lived all their lives in Donetsk or Lugansk Oblast and never traveled. For example, even from Slavyansk, a small town, to Donetsk, bigger city, it was a big deal for them, like a journey, big journey. Now they are happy, and they like survived a cultural shock when they escaped from that regions. They relocated to new places, and those people who left in Donetsk Oblast, in the governmental controlled territories, they are very different. They do not understand those who are IDPs. At the same time, I would like to mention the old Soviet-style matrix of relations between some institutions. For example, many cultural institutions, which in old Soviet times used to get instructions from the party leaders or from the local governments about the project that they should realize. Now they, when there is no such instructions, they got lost in this today's situation. They are not ready to put forward any initiatives, and unfortunately this emptiness quite often is filled with the nationalistic ideas, which could be very dangerous, which Maxim mentioned, and we can observe this in cultural area. I think this might become a huge risk, a huge danger, because this nationalization is happening very quickly, and we saw this in course of decommunization process. On the other hand, people who belong to the cultural area, they are internally prepared to communicate with each other. Quite often, they should be prepared. Quite often, they are not prepared to do this. Sometimes we invite our colleagues from DPR or LPR to discuss some cultural projects, but we find out that people are not ready to accept what is suggested, and there are some journalists who work in the area of culture and suggest that in DPR, in LPR, there are not total enemies. There are people with whom we could establish cultural ties. They are sometimes they do not find any agreement among those who stay here in Ukrainian side. Also, we lack very much the vision of peace, while I think cultural workers or researchers, scientific workers could suggest some visions of the peaceful future. We do not have such projects, so we quite easily can identify the problem, what's going on the occupied territories. We can shoot a video or we can make photos, but we do not offer any possible solutions. We do not offer any ways out for people how to resolve the problem. And I can mention one of the projects which is implemented in Kharkiv, at least they planned to do it. They wanted to present IDPs in positive light. That is what Sasha mentioned. And they wanted to make this in retrospective from the times of Chernobyl disaster, when there was first wave of IDPs in Ukraine from 1986 until now. I'd been thinking about the fractions, societal fractions, and I came to conclusion that there are several of them. Of course, I do not think that I have a comprehensive vision of the problems, but nevertheless, there are some ideas. So the first societal fraction is distrust to authorities, lack of trust in the governmental institutions. What I observe about the Ministry of Education, for example, people who came to the Ministry of Education after Maidan events, they were forced to cope with this lack of trust, and they started to take the defensive position, and partially because of bifurcated corruption inside the ministry, and they wanted to they were very suspicious about people around them, were suspicious about possible corruption, and this slowed down all the processes and hindered all the processes inside the ministries, inside all the institutions. And I think this forced all the this hindered all the processes. They were more slow than we expected. Quite often, people who came to the ministries with a proactive position program of reforming, but they did not know upon whom to rely, who are corrupt, who are not corrupt, and the process was very slow. So we have to find out how to not to waste time on these defensive measures inside the institutions. Of course, the best option is to open to announce open competitions to fill in positions in the ministry, but low salaries do not allow to do this. Actually, now those teams which come to the ministry, these are enthusiasts ready to work with at negligible wages, but to reform the state. Another issue is our anti-corruption issues. My background was as a history student, although I'm not a professional researcher of history, but nevertheless, I have this vision, and one of my friends, Katerina Dronova, we analyzed decommunization laws and published our paper on the pages of Kritika publication. And immediately I found out that my senior colleagues perceived this rather critically, and nevertheless I was unable to involve my professors into this discussion. I was unable to involve Ukrainian historians into discussion. There is a famous statement by Pierre Nara that the politics should not interfere into history. And quite often we hear that politics in historical studies should not be present. And I did not manage to involve Ukrainian historians into this. So this shows that in the discourse, societal discourse, which we had in 2014, it was impossible to bring experienced and well-educated people and involve them into this really difficult societal discussions. And the third, my statement will be about education. It seems to me that that we have an exaggerated discourse of pseudo opinion making. We have a lot of speaking heads in internet space, which do not allow people to think themselves, to produce their personal opinion. Each ministry, for example, have to compete with opinion maker on Facebook who will produce the opinion which is very much different from the ministry opinion and from any governmental position. And unfortunately, this pseudo opinion making is used quite often to discredit any good idea, any good project. And all this is against the background of rapid worsening, rapid deterioration of the quality of our secondary education. And actually now the ministry is afraid to conduct a measuring of the quality of secondary education. And now we expect to have a PISA survey, and all the authorities are afraid of this future research. We understand that the results will be very poor, and this problem is not mentioned publicly. And the quality of education, and quite often we observe speculations about education, and just the same as there are a lot of speculations about IDPs. And all this despite the fact that education is the most soft form of for integration. I come from Kirovograd, which is rather eastern city, and I personally survived this soft integration into Ukrainian society. Actually now I speak not only just about educational issues, but about social economic issues. I think that the educational soft integration of young people into Ukrainian society might become a strong social lift for them. I'm just providing a fragmental illustrations. It's not like a systemic view. Just one example. Last year, our MPs voted for the law which allows the IDP applicants to enter university without that special severe examination which exists for ordinary graduates of schools. This was done because the school graduates from occupied territories, they cannot comply with the level of education that is gained by Ukrainian school graduates. But at the same time, they were allowed to enter only those universities which were evacuated, which were transferred to mainland Ukraine from occupied territories. Thus, those students were actually discriminated. I visited one of these evacuated universities from Donetsk, from Lugansk. Then, 5 or 4 years later, in result of this law, we will have students with poor education. And Lugansk University was evacuated to small city of Starobilsk. Actually, this is not a full-fledged university. This is like a pseudo-university now. And in 5 years, the students won't be competitive in the labor market. And the rector of this university is a rector, Petro Kurila, who is a member of Petro Poroshenko bloc, who wanted to get budget funding for his university due to that law which was passed by the parliament for IDP students. And of course, the bureaucrats and the Ministry of Education understood that this was actually stigmatization of students, but they could do nothing.
Thank you. Now maybe Austrian colleagues, if they want to ask some questions, you can ask them now. And then we will listen to other speakers.
Remarks or questions. The one is, I think there's a similarity between all our societies, that there's a danger of, more danger than before, of splitting societies into different groups, also intellectually, emotionally, when there's not much growth or when there's a crisis. And you spoke particularly about the situation in the occupied area or the non-government controlled areas with the young people who after 10, 20 years have been fed by Russian propaganda and have a totally different opinion. So is there a possibility to counter that, to have some activities like yours in order to, inside government-controlled Ukraine, but also inside the occupied areas, not to allow that split, that the one is more or less, let's say, Russified or Sovietized in their whole mindset, and the rest is hopefully promoting towards a more modern, liberal society. Think about orientation on sexual liberties and other issues, because in Russia, of course, Europe is identified by Putin and by the Orthodox Church as only interested in same-sex marriage and other issues. So there's this kind of propaganda. So how can you counter that, or is that a possibility to fight against, knowing that, as you said, also inside the present Ukraine government-controlled areas, there are people who say, oh, it was nice time when we had still Yanukovych or the old system. But I think that this is one question. The other question perhaps to you, because was also mentioned the question of decommunization or the fight against the common, the Soviet heritage. I have much sympathy for saying history is history and we cannot just deny it. On the other hand, there are people who say, well, this was a time before Holodomor, for cruelty towards Ukraine citizen. How can you justify that you fight for having that past present in the form of monuments and other? How do you see that kind of, what's your argument to say, well, yes, it was bad, but still we should not forget? Because, of course, I don't want to compare, because that would be nonsense. The fight against, symbols from Nazi areas, swastika and so on, which in some of our countries are totally forbidden. And there was also an attempt in Europe to say that's the same. The Soviet time and the Nazi time, and all the symbols should be not allowed anymore. So how do you see that dispute, and how is that conflict in the society taking place? And what's your argument to say, well, that's our history and let's not forget, even if we don't like it? Or maybe some people like it. Especially for her, and the others in general.
We are working with these topics mostly as artists. As Igor said, there's a process of stigmatization. If a civil servant or politician talks about preserving cultural heritage, and then they got the tag that they are the enemy of Ukraine. And we are also saying that the objects are not to be prohibited, but we need to think about them, because today's legislation declares decommunization legislation has 4 laws. One talks about opening archives and about accusation of communist against communist regime, but the archives are not accessible for everyone, and you need to try hard to get this information from archives. But all the attention is concentrated on the second part of the law, which is about removing the symbols of Soviet past from public space. That's renaming the streets and removing the symbols from the architectural monuments. Instead of rethinking of what was the system in Soviet times, instead of thinking how to change that mechanism, we're using same methods that we used in Soviet times. We're just removing, hiding, eliminating something that could remind us of the history of the Soviet times, of communist Ukraine. And we are working, well, in such a way the art pieces that were created by Ukrainian artists in Soviet times should be preserved, but at the same time we need to think about them again. We need to look at them not like we looked at them in Soviet times, that it's not ideological propaganda, but from the critical point of view. We need to represent them as renewed objects that have a critical message. We can look at them not as insiders of the Soviet ideology, but as a new democratic society. I would like to add to what Evgenia mentioned. One thing is symbols that remind us of those times, some of them, that they are to be dismantled, but another thing is methods, ways which are used. They copy Soviet methods of the 30s when they were destroying the art, and these methods are barbarian. That's a bad example for the society, because this way you can treat any monument. And also that means that with any changes, anyone can eliminate and will have the right to eliminate other monuments. Of course, these symbols are to be dismantled, but the problem is about the double standards. On the one hand, to destroy the monument is very simple, but to rehabilitate Parajanov, no one's trying to do that, because we know that this case was about his homosexuality. And no one's talking about that. So there's more criticism to these standards.
Okay, thanks. Back to the role of civil society. I would like to ask, please, what would help to strengthen the role of civil society in Ukraine? Because I think it's more than important to strengthen the civil society and the cooperation and the communication with the European Union or others in a conflict situation to help to get solutions.
As a representative of civil society, I will answer. You know, during Yanukovych's regime, the civil society was strengthening in opposition to the authorities. Then with the revolution, that was the revolution of the civil society. Now we are in the situation when, like Lesya and Maxim said, there is a mistrust, but on the other hand, fragmentation in civil society. There are some crisis phenomena happening. The civil society cannot oppose the authorities in the situation of war, because there will be conflicts inside the civil society. And as I'm answering to Austrian politician, I can say we have one common thing in Ukraine, and that's global thing. The conflict between modernizational processes and traditionalists, between conservative and more progressive. That is what Maxim was talking about, human rights and nationalism. That is pan-European phenomena. I believe in Austria, in France, in Germany, you have the same problem, the inflow of immigrants and radical turning of the society to the right. As well as in Ukraine, this dichotomy between traditionalists and modernizational activists was expressed at Maidan, in the conflict Maidan, anti-Maidan. Maidan was pro-European modernizational, and anti-Maidan was for the old, for more conservative, even pro-Russian, pro-Putin, pro-empire. But in the situation of war, I believe that we now have a gap, and the civil society well, the authorities took all the powers from the civil society, and it's not Maidan, anti-Maidan, but it's pro-Ukrainian position and anti-Ukrainian position. And today the civil society, well, the hegemony is always black and white. Now we are in the crisis of the civil society.
Таке от поняття недовіра.
And there's such a thing as mistrust. The civil society is the communicator of mistrust to authorities. He's just talking too complicated, sorry. It's even difficult for interpreters to understand, sorry. I'll speak slower.
You're speaking very well English. I heard you in Vienna. So it's really it
Okay.
makes it really
Okay.
much
It is unexpected. Yes, but I've just finished my point about this crisis of civil society. And what is my, thesis for today is that there are two actually symptoms of Ukrainian civil society: the absence of leftist politics, just like void. Left politics is absolutely absent in official, in statist discourse institutes. And the second symptom is the unpopularity of anti-war position. But I am for anti-war position, but I do not see the institution of this, mediator of this position. So that is the two voids of Ukrainian, even not official politics, but even the civil society. Well, what does it mean? It means that today in Ukraine we have many straters of micro wars between, as I said, pro-Ukrainians and anti-Ukrainian, pro-Poroshenko, pro-Putin, So I claim actually for the third position, which is not represented in the official politics. That is why I am for distrust. But in another sense, maybe in the sense of Pierre Rosanvallon, counter-democracy. It means that we should criticize the power. We should help you to be more, to be better, to go on. Distrust, it means counter-democracy in this sense.
Так, Леся. Але якщо можна, от прям трошки, тому що в нас вже...
We don't have much time left.
But, okay, well, first of all, I would like to say that I agree with Andrei on the one hand and totally disagree on the other hand. I do not agree that the civil society is in a huge crisis and very weak. I think it's very strong, but it's growing up, and it's experiencing all sorts of different experiences now, and those experiences are very new to very many groups and people again. Also, when we are speaking about power or authorities, Vlada in Ukrainian, I have to tell you something, that once you try to to work from that part, you suddenly realize, and I suspect you had this experience, that this power it's not monolith, it almost does not agree, and the major feeling that is there in that power is powerlessness. And then, because those institutions are extremely, extremely weak, they have not been reformed for a very long time. And I totally disagree that the civil society was instrumentalized by the abstract power, which I think does not exist as an abstract power. But of course, it did not give us those great, fast results that we wanted. It just, the civil society made one step towards the official institutions, got terrified how inefficient and powerless they are, and stepped out. And those institutions, they got paralyzed by huge distrust they're getting. I'm not saying that they should not be criticized, and by the way, I left the ministry almost a year and a half ago, so I'm not in the power any longer, and I only spent there 8 months. But
You have more power now or before?
Before.
Because you said the institutions are powerless. So.
No. It depends what you mean. Yeah, it depends what you mean by that. But I think the situation is really complex. But to finish up with that, to answer your question, how the civil society can be helped. First of all, I think the civil society has to take more responsibility, which means all sorts of projects where civil activists are getting actual responsibility, not just criticizing, by doing something by themselves is very useful. For example, doing something together with actual officials. As Olga has mentioned, you are doing an how do you say it? Привоєнні території. Pre-war? In English, I meant. Yeah, frontline, yes, territories. This is working together and trying to rehumanize each other would be useful, I think. So, thank you. Sorry for being.
Thank you. Давайте, може...
Let us probably, I suggest that we should talk about media as well, because it's very important component of reconciliation and dialogue. Andrei wanted to say something, and then Zakhar Popovich. Andrei, you as a person who works in media, who follows the conflict, can you tell us how the issue of reconciliation is discussed inside the media community? And how do readers or viewers perceive it? How does the audience perceive it? How is it explained? How complicated it is to discuss some dialogue? A dialogue about the war conflict, or about the problems between different groups in this society. How does this happen? That is very complicated issue. I believe that now Ukrainian media are in very difficult situation. That's the most difficult situation. On the one hand, there is a freedom, many instruments to use the freedom at different platforms, starting from social media and down to more traditional ones. But the people from media in times of war failed to not get involved into propaganda movement, which is not imposed by the authorities. That's not true. But we can say that now we have the process when the opinion makers very often are stronger than the representatives of media, and the general opinion that in times of war you cannot talk about reconciliation while the Ukrainian territory is occupied, and it's not time to have a dialogue with people who are on the territory which is not controlled by Ukrainian government. I very often talk to people who are there so often that it's even difficult to generalize what they represent. One thing I can tell you, people who are there, they're not 100% supporters of Putin and separatist regimes who cannot cope with the social economic situation. Many people are on pro-Ukrainian positions, and the separatists even mentioned that. So media, when they start talking about reconciliation, they are trying to get involved into this. The representatives of the other side, they become the object of criticism and obstruction from nationalistic community and authorities. Authorities in Ukraine, unfortunately, like to play with these contradictions, and they love to use some battalions, some groups which express some nationalistic slogans in their own interests. Quite recently there was this awful situation when they set to fire the building of Inter TV channel that was accused of having pro-Russian positions, because the owners of this TV channel are people who are related to former President Yanukovych. Maybe these accusations do have some grounds, but people shouldn't be fighting using such methods that complicates our work. It's very difficult to work when the pressure is from both sides, because separatists are following strongly what Ukrainian media are talking about. Russia is following what the Ukrainian media are talking about, and they're trying to transmit it to occupied territories in distorted way and to their own territory. Very often, all the time I monitor media that separatists have, and very often some news about Ukraine, about Austria, we have to decipher to understand what was said in reality and what was distorted by them. Like today there's the news that in Austria the representative office of Lugansk People's Republic was opened, but what happened there in reality, if you have an opportunity, I would like to request you to get from you some feedback. And one more thing, people who are now on the occupied territories, just common people, very often they leave that territory, go to Ukrainian territory. It's interesting to talk to them, how they are trying to basically break through this separatist media. They cannot even read some of Ukrainian media, and for them it's a shock when they come out of that territory. There are many stereotypes that are imposed on them by separatists, and they are not true. It's difficult to see it when you go to the liberated territory. But I believe if these external instruments exercise pressure on Ukrainian mass media, and like if what Russians say with negative notes, here they say with positive notes, then those people will not have a contrast when they come to liberated territory. Okay, they will see that they call everything black, we call everything white, there's no difference. It is important for us, for Ukrainian media, not to become a propaganda type media, but become an instrument to cover all the events truly. And this way to help people get integrated, the people who are on the occupied territory, to get them integrated into normal society. I don't know whether the reconciliation is possible with the structures of separatists, but I know that if the civil society is powerful in Ukraine, if people treat authorities critically, treat each other with criticism, there's a war of everyone against everyone now, but on that territory it's all cemented by this repression regime. And I don't know, maybe there should be some initiatives to get people involved into old Ukrainian or old European society, avoiding these bodies, Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republic, so-called People's Republic. So these people, if they get connected to this hypothetical net, they will be free. And there are many people on such territory.
Zahar Popovich, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I think the discussion is interesting. Cannot hear.
You would be interested in something.
The embassy of Lugansk Republic opened.
In Austria, but on the other hand, we have a representation of Catalonia, of any region. Anybody can say, according to Austrian law, I'm representing this and this part of the world. It's not recognized diplomatically. I don't know anything about detail, but just to say that does not mean that it is something of a diplomatic representation. It's a person who says, I am representing, nothing more, but just to explain.
Yeah, can I try to make several points? Yeah, really we have this illusion of civil society to become stronger, but if you follow the discussion, you can find that this civil society became speechless. Yes, we have taboos. We actually explicitly said it here, that we have taboo on kind of anti-war things, yes, criticizing the war. We have taboo to organized public events, including some civil society people from these occupied territories. We are living in the world like there is no such people there. And all these attempts are stigmatized, yes. And we also have this taboo of decommunization. Yeah, we can't criticize it. Even anybody can do it publicly. And the next step is that we actually are very light in criticizing even some kind of economic politics of our government. If the only people who are criticizing government are kind of opposition bloc people and the mainstream media, the civil society in Kiev, trying to stigmatize them. They are separatists. Therefore, if you are criticizing the even economic politics of our government, and we are in this vicious cycle that actually to go out of these taboos, we should actually the war to stop somehow, and we can't even call to stop this war because it will be not that patriotic and so on and so on. And so in such discourse we have no way out. And we knew very few
except probably Andriy, but most of us knew very few about the situation in these occupied territories. And even if we knew, we are trying to speak like we don't know really what is going on there. And the official position of Ukrainian government is that the elections on these territories could be only after the blocking of the border, only after the international observers come, and so on and so on. And it is good probably, but for civil society people, probably it could be good to call for democratization of the society there. And we also have taboo to call for democratizing of these Donetsk, Lugansk people republics, because people will criticize us that we are like supporting their existence and so on. And this is vicious cycle. And probably we should have, somehow recognize it and try to put this values of human rights and values of democracy probably higher than other values. And we probably need to call for democratization of these societies on their territories. We should try to develop contacts with them and speak to them. And it is not that easy in Ukraine to do it. And it is not that easy even to call for kind of elections there. Because, if you should understand that for major political forces in Ukraine, if it would be elections there, if it would be a political reintegration of these regions into the Ukraine, it will change the political spectrum, the whole political composition of Ukraine. It would be very different political parties. And most of these political parties that are now the mainstream and that took over the Ministry of Interior and most financial currents and most of armed units in kind of reunified democratic Ukraine, they will have no chance. So they will fight, I think, against any kind of peace. That's probably all.
Thank you, Zahar. And unfortunately, we have not much time, maybe 15 minutes, 20. Okay, so Claudia, you have a question? Yeah.
I will be very short.
Yeah.
I just want to continue maybe your thoughts, because we heard in the Hromadske TV, I hope I spoke it out, okay, that there are more than 4 million people living in the non-governmental controlled area. Okay, so I'm thinking, I can't believe that there is no civil society or not many civil society activists working there or expressing their thoughts, or maybe it's more traditionalist, or I don't know if there are any modernist movements, but my question is, are you in contact with people there, and if so, how? And for example, here are no representatives of this traditional or representatives of this traditional values, church representatives. So I really would like to know. I'm sure there are people here also in Kiev representing those values. Are you in contact and exchange with these people? Because I have the feeling this is also more like this kind of pro-modernist Ukrainian.
Yeah, thank you. I think Sasha and after Maxim.
So I have so many answers trying to do that shortly. First of all, about your question, which nobody answered, what can we do with young people who stay in LPR and DPR and they stay they under the firewall from information from Ukraine? So, it's my opinion, like people, like human rights defenders. I mean, we can only give them possibility to get that information if they want, and if they go out from there. We need to give them possibility be there, see there what happened in Ukraine, and stigmatization can be like solution for that. So young people need to have a possibility studying here. And in normal university, I agree with Igor fully. And they, like young people who go out from there, not only in Ukrainian side, could sometimes cross the line of fight line. It's more complicated than going to Russia. So even now we are working with human rights defenders from Russia federations, people who still believe in values of international human rights law, and they work with them. So that's why I know that number of people who go out from LPR and DPR and going to Russia side, that are more than 128,000, and that numbers from NGO, it's not official Russian state numbers. So, and only what can we do that give them possibility to get that information, to get out from there and not be here stigmatized like you are like LPR, DPR fans or something like that. It's for your answer. About I even don't want to start about election in that territory. It's not because it's because election now, it's not way to democratize that territory, because they're not fundamentally freedom there now. They don't have any freedom of speech, any freedom to be elected. So if some way we get people from Gansk from there, sure, that way can be that people can create their own party and change.
I totally agree. I knew
okay.
the last election in Lugansk and Donetsk. Okay. It was
Okay. So and about your question about connection with the people, we have official 1,080,000 people who registered like IDPs. And who going to Ukrainian side. I told about 128,000 people who go out in territory of Russia Federation. So it's so. Ну, последние цифры от Ганушкина были такие. Okay, but a lot of people who was born in territory in Lugansk or Donetsk region, they have a property there, but they live and work in other territory of Ukrainians, because we have inside really big possibility to go out from your native town. So a lot of people don't have registration like IDP. So now that's why they are not like organized someone. They like just born before that in Donetsk and now living in Kiev and Lviv or somewhere another way. So numbers of people who go out from there, it's nearly 3 million, but any institution can give you that numbers, like official or something like that. And it's a question that is that people like organized, yeah, and yes, and we have IDP center, we have a lot of organization NGOs who go out from there because they was in the first shooting list for all peer and DPR people with guns, because they was an active part of society. Same situation with political party, like Vladimir Rybak was killed there only because he was a deputy, local deputy Gorlovka, and trying to say the like other political view of this situation. So a lot of political activists, deputy, they go out from there, just escaped, because they was in shooting list, and we even have such documents when we go there and in Slavyansk after they are releasing. So now in that territory we have only some humanitarian initiatives who before that working like with clients with AIDS, with some of them with children. We have connection with them, but other new NGOs or new some society activists or like movement or something like that, now they can possibility to create there, because LPR, DPR authorities put him down at all. They don't give such possibility. So we have connection only personality. we're trying to speak with people who go out from there, or even like doctors from pro-Ukrainian territory speak with doctors who stay there. A lot of them stay not because ideology view, because they like don't wanna. They wanna be with their clients, with people who need their care, and so on and so forth. So a lot of such connection. That's why that's only one possibility for us. Take information from there, like human rights defenders.
Максим?
Maxim?
Was already answered more or less, because what we witness here, and this is where I totally disagree with Zahar on this very point, we see blooming diversity of opinions, and for the first time in 25 years of Ukrainian independence, we see very active public discussion in Ukrainian society about every single important event. Like, in 2012, when I was asked during my trip to the EU countries, what is Ukrainian public discussion about migration? It's like Ukrainian public discussion on migration, it just does not exist. Because there was no Ukrainian public discussion about anything, because the general overall mood was they will decide themselves. They're up, the party, the government. There is no point discussing this. For the last 2 years, everything is the subject for public scrutiny. Sometimes these discussions obviously go nasty. But I, for myself, do not have any problems. I have some problems afterwards, maybe, but I do not have any problems criticizing the dehumanization process, not as an artist, but as a human rights activist. There is a very important aspect of that. I don't mind criticizing what is going on with the Ministry of Interior and some armed squad, or torture when it happens in the frontline territories. And this is something which is not really possible beyond the front line. The only groups which can exist in civil society, and that was quite rare before. We cooperated with more or less all human rights organizations in Luhansk and Donetsk regions before. Now they're all Kiev, Lviv, and Ternopil human rights organizations. They had to leave, especially after some of their activists were tortured, as they say, brought to the basement. So the only condition on which active civil society can act is absolute loyalty to the leaders of the, basically what can be seen armed gang. And this is why I disagree with Zahar. I cannot imagine to call for democratization of the armed criminal gang, You can call for democratization of political system, regime, country, but not the gang. And I'm afraid I have to say that because some of my friends, just because they were human rights activists, were tortured there. So even when you're loyal, there is some point in time which comes when they come to you and say, if you still exist, maybe you have some resources you have to share with us. And this is what makes it literally impossible. Of course, in 10 or 20 years, if it will continue to be frozen like this, like what we see in Transnistria. We see civil society organizations in Transnistria now, which are very active, very interesting, independent. They have their problems with their Committee of National Security, but in general, they're fine. But it's 20 years afterwards. Maybe it will develop if this conflict is as frozen as it looks like now, maybe in the nearest future. But currently, it's just dangerous for life to do anything, not even pro-Ukrainian, but disloyal to the rulers of those territories. And this also partly touches other questions which were mentioned here. What we can really propose to those young people in the territories, not even to those young people. With media, there is a discussion, and a huge one, if Russia has this huge, well-oiled propaganda machine, which was constructed on different military conflicts year after year. Should we construct our own media propaganda machine? And of course, fortunately, as far as I know, most of professional Ukrainian journalists' answer is no, not even because it's technically not feasible. It is not. We don't have oil. We did not cover Ukrainian-Georgian conflict because there was never such, or Ukrainian-Moldovan conflict because there was never such. But simply because our advantage is different, we can accept variety of opinions in our media space. And this is something which does not exist in Russia. We can have this fierce public discussions, and diversity of views being represented. And this is our strength, and this is how we attract people. They can say something, and they will not be arrested, put in jail, or sanctioned. So this is real advantage, and this is what scares me when we talk about the perspectives. For myself, I'm involved in an initiative where Ukrainian and Russian journalists are brought together to discuss how they cover the conflict in the East, but of course Russian journalists from independent media outlets, which are like 5 maybe in Russia. And it's very interesting because they produced very good materials, journalists from Novaya Gazeta or from TV channel Dozhd or from several news agencies. But now our last meeting in Ukraine, which took place when some local activists found out that Russian journalists will come, their first reaction was, they're Russian journalists, we don't need them, no matter who they are. And this is what is different from last year, for instance. Last year, first they looked what they write or what they film. Now it's more like they're Russian, we don't need them. And just coming up to basically, I'm like a snake biting its own tail. The longer the conflict goes, the more this reaction will be typical. And this is something that really worries us. But as for now, this diversity in very harsh economic circumstances, and on this point I agree with Zahar, when it comes to civil society organizations, austerity measures in economy, deep economic crisis, is something that undermines this huge volunteer movement, this huge civil society energy. People are just getting poorer, sicker, and tired. But even under these circumstances, this diversity of opinions and culture of public discussion which we see being born just in front of us is our real advantage. And this is something we really need to treasure.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we have to complete our public part of conversation. And maybe we may continue this conversation. Okay. But maybe with a cup of coffee or wine, we have. So I hope this conversation was productive. I think it was. Yeah. And thank you very much that you have organized this. Yeah. And thank you all. So.
I think the Austrian side is very grateful to you that you spend your time with us. Probably not the first time with visitors from the outside, but I think it was very fruitful for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So.
Thank you for the translation and all and your German.